I'm Susu Duga. I am PIN's programming chair and co-chair. I want to thank you for all coming out here to listen to our amazing speaker, Dr. Charles Fay, the CEO of Love and Logic Institute. I want to remind you of a few things that you might not know. The bathrooms are out here to the right and then to the left. If you need them, just go out the back door and go that way. There are plenty of snacks. Please feel free to pop up and get something if you're feeling that need in the middle of the presentation. We also have a red bucket at the beginning of the red table. Our lovely Vanna White is showing us that. You can write your name on one of the orange papers, and we will be having a couple of drawings for a free book. And Dr. Fay is happy to sign any of those books for you. There was a handout when you walked in. Hopefully you got that. And there is also PIN tablets for you to write on, notepads for you to write on if you would like to take notes for today. Right now I'd like to welcome Jeff Cheely. He is with Cheely Camps. How many of y'all have heard about Cheely Camps? It has been around for over 100 years, right? Cheely Camps is one of our 3 sponsors. Cheely Camps, Happy Canyon Flowers, and Love and Logic. And so Jeff is just going to share with you a little bit about the idea of camps and their benefit.
Thank you, Susu. Good morning. I'm glad you guys are here. When Susu said, well, you can come to one of our sessions, I looked down the list and saw Love and Logic was one of them. I'm like, well, that's it. My wife and I attended a Love and Logic training when our children were like 2, and we still, now they're 12, 14, and 15, and we still go back and like, oh, we didn't use Love and Logic on that one, or we should have used, or, oh, good job. So anyway, my sister and I are the 4th generation of the Cheely family to operate Cheely Camps. We're proud of the impact that we have. We're honored to be in the youth development space. And I don't really want to pitch Cheely, but I would love to pitch summer camps in general. There's a lot of conversation out right now just about the benefits that are very different than they were maybe 10 or 20 years ago. But I've had a couple conversations this morning. For those of you that do send your children to camp, you know about the benefit of them learning how to join community. And I think our children are losing this opportunity or this skill in taking and moving from one community to another community and building friends and finding their place in that new community and finding how they can contribute. I talked to the dean of DU years ago, and she said that they are noticing that their incoming freshmen at that time did not know how to just kind of find their new space. They'd left all their high school friends behind. They'd come in and they didn't know how to find people that had, similar interests and how to make friends. And so 20 years ago, we felt like, gosh, if 6 children were sitting around just playing in the dirt, talking or throwing a ball or not really being that active, we're like, no, they need to go hike, they need to go ride, they need to go do something really active. That's what their parents sent them here to do. And now we're realizing that they're actually learning skills when they're just sitting there playing in the dirt. When you have a bunch of 9-year-olds that are building forts and there's they've got sticks that are going down the stream, they're learning how to negotiate, they're learning how to be creative, they're really learning a lot of different things. So I would encourage you, if you're looking at your summer, many people at this time of the year are looking at what does my summer look like for my children. Hanging out and just, kind of going to the pool or hanging out in the neighborhood is great, but there's a lot of benefit, long-term benefit in your children's growth, in their social emotional growth, in their ability to make friends and navigate the world that happens at summer camp. So I know as parents often we think that, oh, we're the ones that really need to help shape our children, and you'd be amazed when you take the parents out and you put a really cool 21-year-old hanging out with them. The 21-year-old can have a really positive impact on your children. So if you're interested, we do a 4-week program. Of course, we'd love to talk to you. Our website is just cheely.com. But if you're looking for something different and you're like, oh, that's not really what we want a 1 week, we want 2 week, we want these different types of things, please reach out. Our email and contact information's on the site. We realize that we're one of the leaders in camping, but we realize that finding the right camp for a family is really our purpose. If it's not us and it's somewhere else, that we still want to be involved in helping you find something that works for you. So we're honored to have sponsored PIN for many years and love what this organization does for our community as well. So am I turning this back over to you, Susu? Good. Okay. Yeah. We do a family camp. Yeah, we do a 1 week program for 8 to 10-year-olds. And then we do a 4-week session for 9 through 17-year-olds. And then we do a family camp for families. I think it's age 4 and up now. And that fills up really quick. I think we're full for this summer, but if that's something you're interested in, definitely let us know because things are always changing. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Man, you got to plan your summer a long time in advance, right? All righty. Have a stand up. Get your blood moving for a little bit. Again, welcome to PIN. I'm Susu, and we are so glad you are here. How many of you, great reminder, turn off your phones. You're going to be having enough information and stimulation to your brain coming at you from Dr. Fay. How many of you, this is your first time to come to PIN? Raise your hand. Welcome. We are so glad you are here. How many of you have never read or heard about Love and Logic? Wow. Okay, you got a following here, Charles. How many of you have learned about Love and Logic when your kids were small enough to pick them up and carry them up the stairs or to their crib? Wow, awesome. How many of you figured out that you needed something when your kids started elementary school? And that's when you found Love and Logic. How many of you went through middle school and like, oh my gosh, what did I miss? I'm going crazy. And that's when you discovered Love and Logic. All right. And how many of you waited until high school? Okay. Oh, Bobby. Okay, how many of you have kids who are younger than elementary school? Great. Oh, look at this. Wonderful. Elementary school. Wonderful. The dreaded middle school. When you're pulling out all the stops, what do I do? And high school, where your kids are probably giving it back to you if you've been doing Love and Logic for a while. How about kids out of the house or trying to get out of the house and not in the middle of the night? Okay. All right. How many of you I know are grandparenting with a little bit of Love and Logic? All right. Fantastic. Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. We are so glad you are here. This is going to be a wonderful use of your time. PIN seeks to bring you speakers that will not just give you information, but inspire you to incorporate changes into your life that are doable, bite-sized, and can make lasting changes for you. I wanted to remind you that there are some wonderful books in the back of the room, starting with the foundation, which is Parenting with Love and Logic. This was written by Charles's dad, Jim Fay, and the other co-founder of Love and Logic, Foster Klein. There are so many resources. Early childhood. This was fabulous for me when my kids were little. This one I love, When Kids Leave You Speechless. You can just go into the beginning and say, what do I need? When you've got disrespectful looks and actions, go to page 61. When your kid says it's not fair, no one's ever heard that before. So this is a great resource. Charles's book, From Bad Grades to Great Life, Unlocking the Mystery of Achievement, if you need to help your kid get motivated. And then and there's more. But today, we have a brand new book, an offering, Raising Mentally Strong Kids: How to Combine the Power of Neuroscience with Love and Logic to Grow Confident, Kind, Responsible, and Resilient Children and Young Adults. And if that's not what we all want for our kids, confident, kind, responsible, resilient, that's what we need in this world. We need those as children. We need them as adults. So Charles wrote this book in conjunction with Daniel Amen, Dr. Daniel Amen, and he's going to be signing any books that you wish to buy. We're going to have drawings for books, so if you haven't already put your name on an orange piece of paper, make sure and go back there at some point, and you can maybe be lucky today. But Charles is like the original Love and Logic person, because he was raised with Love and Logic as it was being developed with his father, Jim Fay. And if you haven't heard Jim speak, you can look on our PIN website and go to the past recordings, and Jim spoke about 1.5 years ago and wanted to be here today, but he was unable to do that. Charles has worked in numerous settings, from schools to hospitals to outpatient. You name it, he's seen it. So I'm going to let him start in with a specific topic of how you can help get your kids to that resilient, caring, responsible end product that we all want. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, are you guys ready to have some fun? Oh, you do not sound like you're ready to have some fun. Let's try that again. You ready to have some fun? Now, why is that so important in parenting? Why is it so important for us to have a great time as we're doing it? Because our kids are watching, right? And I think about it a lot like this. I want my kids to see me having a really great time most of the time with them, so that someday they will want to have kids of their own, and I will have a lot of grandkids. There's a motivation there, okay? But would our time be valuable to you? Would it be fun if we could perhaps giggle a little bit here and there, and you could also hear some ideas, maybe just 5 steps for how we can work with our kids, how we can raise our kids so that they will end up being head and shoulders above the crowd in terms of their ability to handle challenges. Would that be valuable to you? Do you think, I'll ask you this. What are the odds that your kids are going to encounter trials in their lives? What are the odds that they're going to encounter challenges? What are the odds that they're going to be searching for hope at the end of their rope, maybe when they have their own kids? And when is it best for them, and coming close here, when is it best for them to learn about how to handle the really tough times? How about when they're out in the world and they're maybe a couple states away at some other school or on a job, and you can't be there? Or would it be best if it happened right now so you can be there and you can love them and you can support them as they're going through it? That's kind of the way I think about this. And so how many of you think it would be fun if you could hear some stories this morning and some examples? Would that be more fun and more effective than if I focus just on droning on and on about neuroscience and theory and all that sort of thing? How many of you vote for stories? Oh, you want both. You want it all, right? How many of you vote for, maybe even I'll throw in a couple little parables that cause us to think, because stories stick and parables penetrate the heart. And we start learning deep concepts in simple ways. Don't you love it? Let's stop right now. Let's take a deep breath. Can you take a deep breath and let it out? We have this thing called the internet. Perhaps you've heard of it. And the internet is this wonderful thing, but we get on there, and does it cause us to be calmer and more confident in our parenting? And us psychologist types, us psychiatrist types, us mental health expert types, if there's such a thing, have whipped up people into an utter frenzy in America and throughout the world about how to raise kids. And there's great news. You can do this, and it does not have to be complicated. You do not have to be perfect. See, wouldn't it be a tragedy if parents were perfect? If we could actually accomplish that feat, could you imagine how narcissistic our children would be? Believing that the world is perfect and that the world is there to meet their needs all the time. And see, the beautiful plan here in parenting is that if we can take a deep breath and we can remember two things, just two things, and come in close here with these two things. And I want you to get these locked into your mind. And I want you, at times when you feel overwhelmed, you can take a deep breath, you can let it out, and you can say to yourself, if I can just do my best to do these two general things, all in all, things are going to turn out well. How important is it for kids to feel loved? Duh. We all get that, right? So if we can love our kids in our hearts, how important is it for kids to have parents who are strong? I didn't hear you with that one. It's not quite as natural, is it? Because we live in the love age, right? But how important is it for kids to see their parents as being strong? Is that pretty important? So if I can be loving, and if I can be strong, and I can do that fairly consistently without being perfect, what are the odds that my kids are going to turn out pretty well? So the next time you feel anxious, the next time you're at Starbucks and you're talking with friends about parenting and your head starts to explode because of all the new ideas, can you go back to those two things and say, okay, there's going to be a lot of different styles. Every kid is different. Most of the things about parenting are actually beyond our control. Yikes. True or not true? Okay? But if I can devote myself to have love in my heart, and I can prove to the kids that I love them enough to set limits and I love them enough to be strong, what are the odds that if I forget everything else, things are going to turn out pretty well? Can you do this? I didn't hear you. Can you do this? Does it have to be complicated? Absolutely not. If you have a friend who likes to make it complicated, sad for them, okay? But let's talk about a couple of moms. See, two mothers who used to be really good mothers until they learned about this love and logic approach. Yeah, they were good moms. One of them was a third grade teacher. The other was the mother of a 9-year-old who was in that third grade teacher's class. And both of these mothers, where did they learn about how to become great mothers? How about from their own mothers? Okay? And by the way, am I just talking about mothers? How about dads? Okay? Where do dads learn about how to be great dads? By watching their own dads. Where else? From relatives, from friends of the family, from society, from television programs, from the whole mix of stimuli coming into our brains, right? And these two mothers learned some things about what good mothers do. Now, what do good mothers do, they thought? Well, good mothers make sure that their kids' clothes match. And good mothers make sure their kids' hair is fairly well combed. And good mothers make sure that their kids have friends and have plenty of stimulating activities to go to. Good mothers make sure that their kids get along well with their teachers and do well in school. And if they don't do well in school, they find some way of helping to make sure that their kids do well in school. Good mothers make sure that their kids have enough food and that it's always warm and that their kids eat enough of that food, even if their kids don't want to eat that food. And good mothers make sure that the kids get along with their siblings. Good mothers do a lot of things. Good mothers make everything okay. Is that a huge load? And you've gotten that, haven't you? And I think it's getting even more pressure-filled. Again, with the internet, all these different ideas about all these things that good mothers have to do. Now, dads get the same messages. They're packaged in simpler form because I think that's maybe all we can handle. But basically, we're taught that we're supposed to have one here. We have a little holster here. We have one in the holster here, one in the holster here. Not 6 shooters, no rolls of duct tape. We fix things. We fix things. It's just a different style of the same thing. We try to control the outcome. Because we've been under this pressure, this combined societal pressure of feeling like we just have to be on top of our game all the time if we're good and conscientious parents. Is this making any sense? Is this resonating with you at all? And see, what happens when we start feeling this way? I mean, let's think about this in a different way. What happens when I feel like the whole thing is on my shoulders? Just take a moment, turn to the person next to you, to your table, and discuss what happens when I feel like everything is on my shoulders and that I have to make everything okay and I have to control how this ends up. Go ahead. Take a couple minutes to do that. Oh, you're having a really good discussion. I have a question for you. I have a question for you. How do kids decide how to feel about stuff? How do kids decide to feel about stuff? Little soundbite. Kids take their emotional cues from the adults around them. They're like earthquake detectors. They just pick up on the reverberations, don't they? Yeah. So what happens when we own it all? Just blurt it out, some thoughts. I mean, we don't have to be polite in here, okay? You get less loving. Shorter patience. I have that problem too, a lot. What else? We crack. Feel invisible. Wow, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, it's like we're living in the past and we're living in the future. but we're not living in the present. Because anxiety steals the present, doesn't it? And now when we get more concerned about all these things, then somehow magically it makes good outcomes happen, though. It's magically somehow our kids become more resilient and resourceful when we worry about them becoming resilient and resourceful, right? That was my mom's mentality. She just struggled with anxiety. I lived in a home, with a couple parents that just had general anxiety problems. And my mom really believed that if you worried about something enough, it would make sure that it never happened. And a lot of times bad things happen, and she said, there we go, I was worried about that. In fact, we'd get out in the car and we'd always have to turn around because there was always something that was left plugged in. It was the iron, it was something else. We had to go back a few times, and you know what? The house never burned down, so she said, I was right. That's the trap. True or not true? That's the trap, my friends. But see, what these two mothers started realizing too, they were exhausted, they were short, they felt invisible, they weren't living in the moment, their kids were more anxious, but what they started to realize as well is that this strange syndrome started to evolve or start, the people around them were getting infected with this syndrome, and it was the syndrome I call the no sense in all of us worrying about this. What happens when I worry more about my kids' life than they do? What happens when I put more thought into my kids' life than they do? Well, isn't it interesting? Have you ever known a kid and they kind of had this demeanor? And husbands get this as well. I will admit this. But they look around and they start thinking, wait a second, look at that. So-and-so is really worried about my life. So-and-so is worried about my life. That person's concerned about my life. That other person's really concerned about my life. Look at all these people who are worried and concerned about my life. No sense in all of us thinking about this. They've got it handled. I can't tell you how many people say, I'm the only one who has my eyes on the ball in this house. It's a frustrating feeling, isn't it? But see, when we're highly motivated, concerned, conscientious people, which I'm assuming you are since you took this time to come and listen to a parenting thing, when we have that personality, which is a great thing, it's very easy for the people around us to stop taking less responsibility for their lives. You know what I'm saying? Does this resonate at all with you? Okay, so we have these two mothers, okay? This one mother had kids at home and 30 more at school. Think about that. And so, anyway, we'll get back to them because I went out to their school and I did a talk. Yeah, it was fun. In fact, I did a number of talks. I taught a whole series on love and logic. And about a week after that talk, an event took place in both of their lives that changed the direction of their lives. It wasn't me that changed the direction of their lives. It was the event. And here's a teacher. The kids come in from recess. Imagine a third grade classroom. And suddenly this third grader, his eyes get really big, and he runs up to the teacher and he says this, somebody stole my coat. Now, any educators in the room? Okay. Any people who have ever gone to school? Have you ever noticed that nothing is ever lost at school? It's always stolen. Pencils are stolen, coats are stolen, books are stolen, homework assignments. People steal homework assignments like crazy at school. There's always a theft ring going on in every school, every classroom, that things are stolen. Somebody stole my coat. Now, it was a warm spring day, which means kids lose coats, right? Well, he goes up to his teacher, one of these good mothers, and he says, somebody stole my coat. And oh, man, it went off in her brain. I got to fix this problem. And then she stopped, and she thought about some little trees. I told this little story about little trees. And see, I live up in Park County. This way that way, about 70-some miles, and I live at 10,300 feet above sea level. And it's cold and it's windy. But we have a little subdivision up there, way up in the mountains. And, well, IREA, Intermountain Rural Electric Association, which is what the electric company was called in those days. They sent out a letter and said, well, we're worried about fires because all the lines, electric lines, are about 70 years old, and so we're going to come in, we're going to bring in helicopters, we're going to pull those lines out, those poles out, we're going to put in new poles, we're going to put in new lines. It's going to be great. Things will be safer, it'll work better. So they came in one summer and they had helicopters and they cut down a lot of big trees, which was kind of sad, but they had to do it. And they put in new lines. But, you know, they tried to keep the environment looking kind of nice. They left the medium-sized trees off to the side and the smaller ones there. And I was pretty impressed with how well they did. And we had new electric lines. Now, if you know what it's like up at about that altitude during the winter, how fast does the wind blow? How hard does it blow? And that next winter, the little trees and the medium-sized trees and even the bushes, they just blew away. They all fell over and they blew away. And why did that happen? Well, somebody brought it up to IREA and said, hey, you know, all these trees are gone now that you left, and you must have ground up the ground or disturbed the ground. It must be your fault. And the arborist at the electric company, they have to have those, said, yeah, that's what we were concerned about. See, those little trees had been growing up, and they hadn't encountered any wind. And they hadn't encountered, any disruption whatsoever. And as a result, well, you tell me, what happens to a plant, the roots of that plant, when there's no wind, and there's no stress, and there's no movement, and there's no shaking? Those roots, they only grow as strong as they need to grow, right? And see, that's the struggle, the arborist said, is that those roots only grow as strong as they need to grow. And they'd been growing in that soil and what they call duff, just the broken up pine needles and pine cones and bark that has fallen off of those bigger trees. They've just grown in that instead of real soil. And so not only do they not have deep roots, they've also grown only in what those bigger trees have produced. And they fell over. And was there any saving them? And when I went out to the school, I said, all living things require two things to grow and be strong. And what are those two things? I call them the two S's of growth. By the way, these two S's of growth have to do with our body, the strength of our body, the strength of our neurons, the strength of our spirit, the strength of our love. And these two S's are support and struggle. Those two S's are support and struggle. See, when I was a kid, I remember us getting orange juice in those cans, that concentrated orange juice, remember that? Yeah. and it was frozen, and I'd stick it in something, and then you had to put a certain amount of water on top of it. And yeah, I remember that very, very clearly. And what happens when we get that concentrated orange juice? We put it all together, we stick it in the fridge, and we drink it, and it hasn't been shaken at all. Is it strong or is it weak? I do remember learning about that. My mom said, if you don't shake it, everything was a teachable moment with my mom. Right? If you don't shake it, it's going to be weak. It's got to be shook up a bit in order to be the right strength. And I thought, well, okay. And so and I was a teenager, and teenagers are really, they approach tasks with a lot of care. And they move into things slowly, especially teenage boys. They just kind of assess the situation. They think, how can I, kind of exert the right amount of pressure on this and not move into, we're all on the same page right here. And so I don't know how old I was, but I was a teenager, and I decided to shake that thing like crazy. See, the problem was I was shaking it too hard, and the top popped off, and such was another teachable moment in our home. But is it true that people are often awful lot like good old-fashioned concentrated orange juice, right? They need to just be shaken up mentally just enough, but not so much that their lids pop off, right? And struggle and support. That is not an easy balance for a parent, is it? To know just the right amount of struggle and difficulty that our kids need, but also just the right amount of support that they need. Are we tracking here? Coming close, and here's a little soundbite. If we want our kids to grow, we can never consistently, and I'm going to go slow with this. It's not in the handouts. I'm going to go slow with this, and we're going to break this down because the wording here is important. If we want our kids to grow strong, we can never consistently, and underline that word consistently, we can never consistently work harder on their lives than they are. If we want our kids to grow strong, we can never consistently, right, work harder on their lives than they are. Take it a step further. If we want our spouses to continue to be strong and vital as we move into the older years, we can never consistently do everything for them that they could do for themselves. It's a basic principle in life, isn't it? Notice I said consistently. There are times when we have to work harder on other people's lives than they are because they don't have it in themselves to do it. But when we consistently work harder than them, we are meeting our own needs, not theirs. Did you catch that? I'm guilty of all this. By the way, I have a 40-year-old son, my wife and I, 40-year-old son, 30-year-old son, and an 18-year-old son. I have no idea how all that happened. I know the mechanics of it, but I still don't understand it all. But And there have been plenty of times that I know the mechanics of it, but I don't want to get into that. This is not appropriate for given that. Well, okay, so I'll repeat it. Thank you. And your name is? Mary, thank you. Let's thank Mary for asking. Go ahead, give her a hand, all right? But let's make this real. I've got my 3-year-old is trying to learn how to tie his shoes, and he's frustrated. Oh, and now my 6th grader is trying to do his homework, and he's frustrated, and he doesn't feel like he can do it, and he's having a borderline meltdown, and I'm trying to help. And now, let's say I have a teenager, and they've got a problem with their coach. The coach isn't letting them play as much as they want to play, and they're frustrated about it. And now, oh my goodness, this is the challenge. Should I be upset or thankful that these things are happening in their lives? They need help, though, don't they? They need some support. But how do I navigate this so that I don't too much? I can say to myself, the basic rule is, if I want them to grow, I can never, what was the word? I can never consistently do what? Work harder than they are on whose life? On their life. So do I help? Oh, you bet I do. Do I demonstrate compassion? You bet I do. Oh man, tying shoes is really hard. I don't like it. I can't do it. Oh, who believes you can do it? Write that question down. Who believes you can do it? Questions create thinking. Statements create resistance. If you want a kid to believe something, you ask them questions. And you guide them along. Because we are only guides here. We are not the architects. We are not the engineers. We are the guides. And it's a hard thing because you're guiding somebody through a very difficult place much of the time. And when we guide somebody we love through a difficult place, what do we want to do? We want to rescue. Because we get scared. So this teacher, the kid comes into up to her and says, "Somebody stole my coat." And this time, instead of going with the kid down the lost and found, having a counseling session with the kid, dropping everything like she'd done in the past, she looks at him and she says, "Oh, I can't imagine how upsetting it must be to think that you lost your coat." He says, "Yeah, I stole my coat." And she asked him this question. It's such a beautiful, loving question. She asked him, "What do you think you're going to do?" And he said, "I'm doing something, I'm telling you." Which is what a lot of people think a solution is, handing it to somebody else, right? But she asked him, "What do you think you're going to do?" And he says, "I don't know, but somebody stole my coat." You're not listening. She says, "Would you like to hear some ideas?" He says, "What?" She says, "Some kids decide to go and check the lost and found on their way to the bus after school. How would that work for you?" "You're not listening to me." "Would you like another idea?" she asks. "Some kids decide to wait until tomorrow, and then they get back out and talk to the secretary and the janitor and other people to see if they've seen a coat like yours. How would that?" "You're not listening to me." "Would you like another idea?" He says, "No! You don't care." And I'm going home and I'm telling my mom. And you know what? He went over to his desk and he sat down. And he put his head on his desk. And he started thinking deeply about what it was going to be like to go home and recount all the atrocities that occurred at school. To share this with his mother because his mother loved him, unlike this teacher. Now, this teacher took a big step, didn't she? And how does she feel about it now? Did I hear you correctly? Thank you. She spoke truth to all of us. Terrible. How does it feel? Friends, how does it feel when we do what's the very best for our kids and we allow them to struggle? Not very rewarding, is it? Long term. You gotta let him do it. Thank you. Give him a hand. Yeah, go ahead. You gotta let him do it. But let's get real here. Why do you suppose helicopter parenting continues to be a massive issue? Because it's rewarded. We get rewarded when we're the hero. People think we look good. We look like good moms. We look like good dads. We feel good about ourselves. It really builds our self-esteem in the short term. When we operate in that way, it can be very rewarding. But it doesn't help the kid. But, friends, let me ask you, when I share something with somebody, should I paint a rosier picture than what the truth is? Or is it better and more loving if I share something with you and we confront the reality of how it's really going to feel? See, because if I can say to myself, and here's another little soundbite, when I do the right thing in growing strong kids, it will often feel like the wrong thing in the short term. I can't tell you how many times I've had to say that to myself. I've had to say that to myself. Charles, when you do the right thing for raising strong kids, it'll often feel like the wrong thing in the short term. And you might even be criticized by extended family or your spouse or somebody else in your life. So, are you guessing he goes home? Yeah. Are you guessing he told his mom all about it? He walks into the house. And he's ready because you know what mom's going to do? He knows. You know, and by the way, I want to be clear. Dads do these things too. I'm just telling you a story about women, so I don't want to get emails and letters afterwards, right? But, you know, this is the way it worked. He would go home and have a problem, and what would she do? She would take that problem and put it on her back, right? And then she'd also correct whoever in his life created that problem for him. See, the helicopter parents used to be so much tamer. You know, they were like those little Bell helicopters from the 50s and 60s, and they just like, and they do little rescue missions. They had a little rope ladder come out of their butt, and the kid could grab it and be whisked away to some safer place. But now they're turbo attack models. They have missiles on them. Heat-seeking babies, man. They have AI. They don't just have rescue capability, they have offensive tools. And in writing this book, Raising Mentally Strong Kids, came across quite a bit of research on helicopter parenting, strongly correlated with anxiety and depression in kids. You want anxious and depressed kids, be a helicopter parent. It's that simple. Because the underlying message that we don't intend to send through helicopter parenting is, you're not capable, you can't handle it, life's too hard for you, thank goodness I'm here. And then is it any wonder that kids get out in the world And boy, is it a scary place, because they've gotten that message unintended, but our unintended messages are actually louder than our intended messages. Love and Logic, the message has always been, the intended and unintended message of Love and Logic is, kid, you're strong. In fact, you're actually stronger than you think you are. You're strong. You're capable. In fact, you have to be capable, because every single decision you make has a consequence, and it just takes one. See, the whole message of Love and Logic has been hope and pray that your kids make plenty of mistakes. Hope and pray every day that your kids make plenty of mistakes when the price tags are small, so that when the price tags are life and death, they have a very good understanding of cause and effect. And it's got to be done with love, though, doesn't it? Because nothing will work without love. Question for you. I'm going to give you just about 30 seconds to blurt out a little bit of an answer to your friends at the table. But is it loving to allow your kids to struggle? Go ahead. All right. What's the consensus here? Thumbs up if it is, thumbs down if it isn't. Well, I guess you figure where I stand on that, right? So he goes home, and he tells his mother, now what he doesn't know anymore is that she used to be a good mother. He's going to find that out pretty quick. She used to be a good mother. Oh, he goes in and he says, Mom, my teacher wouldn't even listen to me. She wouldn't even help me out, and somebody stole my coat. Mom was not surprised. She told me later on he lost about 2.5 coats per school year. I asked her what half of a coat looked like, and she didn't know, but it was a statistical thing. And later on she said to me, it was the first time I realized how much I was stealing from him and myself by not embracing the fact that learning happens in a place of messiness. She said that to me. I thought that was, I never put it that way. She said, I had no idea how much I was stealing from myself and from him, forgetting that learning and growth takes place most effectively in area of messiness, you know, where it feels like the wheels are kind of coming off. Does that sound like daily life with kids? Why do you suppose it's that way? I mean, all of us have to make choices about this question, but do you suppose there's a reason for that? Do you suppose that there's a bigger purpose for why things oftentimes are hard and messy? Could be. Just throwing that out there. But she looked at him and she said, oh, that sounds like an awful day. It sounds like a horrible day. "Hey, can I get you something to drink? You want a glass of water?" And he says, "No, I just want to tell you my teacher's mean, and you need to tell her that she's mean." And she said, "Oh, tell me about it." And she spent a lot of time listening to him, and she looked into his eyes, and she put her hand on his shoulder, and she hugged him, and she said, I can't even imagine how hard it must be." And then she turned to him, and she asked this question: "What do you think you're going to do?" And his eyes got huge. And he looked at her, and he said, "No, you too!" And he ran in his room. See, both of those previously good mothers were in the same talk, and they loved that question. What do you think you're going to do? That's gold, isn't it? What do you think you're going to do? Is that just with kids, or could it be with adults? What do you think you're going to do? How freeing it is. What's the underlying message of that question? See, and let's remember those underlying unintended messages, those unstated messages are the loudest. The unstated messages are the loudest. So if I micromanage my kids or my employees or anybody else in my life, I needlessly micromanage them. What's the underlying message? If I consider everything a teachable moment and I have to explain to the people in my life what they should be learning from these experiences they're having, what's the underlying message? We don't desire to send that message, do we? I mean, can you imagine getting a traffic ticket? Maybe you can. And you get home and you say to your spouse, "I got a traffic ticket." And your spouse is really sweet. Says, "Oh man, that's got to be awful. What happened?" "I was just going down Arapahoe Road, and I wasn't even going fast, and he pulled me over, and he didn't even care that I was, and I tried to explain it, but then he gave me a ticket." Oh. Well, did you match it up? What do you mean? Well, did you match it up? We've had this conversation before, right? Well, what are you talking about? Well, you know how when we were in the car the other day and you were going a little fast, I said it's pretty simple. You just look and you find one of those signs with the white ones with the black letters, and you just take that number, and then you look at the speedometer and you just match it up. Is that going to improve the level of marital intimacy in that home? It's an annoying habit we get into when we love people. You know what I'm saying? Believe me, actually, my 18-year-old, okay, he used one of my lines on me. Don't you love it? And I was micromanaging. You know why? Because I think it was my self-esteem was at a little bit of a dip, and I thought if I could kind of be a hero or solve a problem or impart some great wisdom on him, then I would feel like a strong, intelligent man. I think that's really what it came down to. And I was explaining something to him that I'd explained 36 million times before, and he turned to me and he said, "Dad, I really love you too much to argue about this." And I think I said to him something like, "Yeah, but it's not fair." And he said, "I love you too much to argue about." And we had a little laugh. And then he said to me, "Dad, to remember what you're always saying, everything doesn't have to be let's hear, teachable moment." And then I think I asked him, I said, "Do you think it would be okay if I did that from time to time and just humored me because it makes me feel good?" He said, "Yeah, I just won't listen to you." I said, "Okay, that works for me." But he went in his room. Remember that kid? You know, I'm telling a bunch of stories, weaving them all together. Am I making any sense, by the way? Okay, I'll trust you on that. I think I'm making some sense here. I like to tell stories. I like weave things together. See, my job is not just to impart information, but I hope that there'll be some little things that will embed themselves in as we talk here, right? And I think that happens in stories. And so he's in his room, and he comes back out. He says, well, somebody stole my coat. He's going to keep at it, and they will. And she said, well, what do you think you're going to do? And he says, I don't know. And she says, would you like to hear some ideas? She's just going with the script. She'd memorized all of this. And he says, well, what? And she said, well, some kids decide to wear a lot of shirts for the rest of the year. How would that work for you? And he said, that's crazy. That's a bad idea. This is Michigan. And it was Michigan. She said, bad idea. And he said, yeah. And by the way, if you're ever offering ideas to somebody, the first one ought to be a lousy one. Especially with kids. They tend to reject the first thing you say, so don't waste a good one. Would you like another idea? Yeah, I hope it's better than the last one. Well, some kids decide to have their mom take them down to the mall and they get a new coat. Oh, he liked that idea. He said, that's a good idea. She said, there's only one problem there. You know, just so you know, how are you going to pay for that? What do you mean? Oh, you know, I pay for one new coat a year now, and not fair. If you loved me. Well, I only have one other idea. She says some kids decide to get their piggy bank out and they get the money that they've saved and they have their mom take them down to the used clothing shop and they find themselves a used coat. How would that work for you? He said, you're mean. You don't love me. And he went in his room. And she felt, but he came out. And he was talking like this. I wonder if any of you have ever heard a 9-year-old or so talk like this. Huh? Mom? Can't hear you. You know. Mom, would you take me down the used clothing shop? She could hear him, but she decided to milk it. Huh? Would you take me down the clothing shop, the used clothing shop, so I could buy myself a new coat, since you won't? She said, let's go. It's the northern suburbs of Detroit, you know. They got in that Mercedes and they headed south. And they pulled up to the place, and he looked around, and he found a coat. It was a few dollars. He thought it was kind of cool because it looked like something a teenager would wear, not a little kid like a 9-year-old, and it didn't have that obnoxious fake furry stuff around the hood or anything, so he picked that one up. And he plunked his money down on the counter. And they got it home, and she washed it about 19 times because you just want to make sure, you know, and he put that coat on and he went off to school. And how did she feel about the whole thing? Still wasn't too sure. Because there was another thing she hadn't considered before, that they were actually going to be going out in public and running into people that they knew, and he would be wearing that. And sure enough, that's what happened. They were out in public, and actually her sister-in-law is there, and her sister-in-law comes up, and what does the kid do? Right away, he gets right up front and center, and he said, look at my new coat. I bought it myself. And the sister-in-law turned to the mother and said, are you having some money problems? Do you need some help? Oh, and he bragged about that coat. And she said, at first I thought, he's just making me look bad. He's just making me look bad. This is passive-aggressive behavior. But she said, I noticed something about his posture. And then it really sinked in when, no, hold on to your seats here. This is crazy, okay? Whatever thief stole that original coat must have been conscience-stricken because they returned it to the lost and found. Can you believe that? And he found that coat about a week later. The new one. The nice one. Which one did he wear? The old one. She said, I started I'm a slow learner. My skull is a little thick, but it started clicking. I started realizing that coat, that worn out, old, crummy coat, was a greater gift to that kid, our kid, than all of the nice things we'd bought him over the years. And by the way, what is the greatest gift we can give our kids? Independence, confidence, the thought that I'm strong enough to handle trials. In fact, I'm even strong enough to handle the trials I make for myself. By the way, don't raise your hand, but have any of you created problems for yourself? Have any of you done that recently? I have. See, life's a pretty scary place to be if you're thinking every single decision I make has to be perfect. I can't handle it if something that I've chosen doesn't work out well. So now we can see the depression and the anxiety correlations here with helicopter parenting. And have we talked about neuroscience at all today? How do we raise calm kids? The brain is just chock full of what scientists call mirror neurons. Neurons that are expressly devoted to mimicking the emotional tone of those around us. It's part of our social nature. Dogs, are you guessing, have a lot of mirror neurons? Oh, yeah. So they rely on each other a lot, don't they? And can your dog know when you're upset? Yeah. How about cats? There's a difference in cats. I like cats a lot. I've always had both. I mean, I'm sad. My dog knows it and he cares. And my cat might know it, but I think most of the time he's thinking good. About time you learned how hard life is. But see, if we want calm kids, we learn, I just want to say, we learn how to be calm ourselves. And when I'll let you know when I figure out how to do that completely. That's a hard thing, isn't it? But it brings us right back full circle to what we're seeing with parents have never been more anxious than now. Some of the research we found in the book, too, was that parents are more stressed than ever before. They feel like they just can't handle it. There's a lot of reasons for that. Life is pretty hard. Life's been hard lately. It really has been. But the neuroscience is clear that the single most powerful thing we can do is take care of ourselves in loving ways. Taking care of ourselves means remembering and I'm going to lump myself in here, that all these parenting experts and all, we keep our jobs by pointing out the challenges that parents face and how things can go wrong, and here are some solutions, right? That's how we make our living. And let's see, now that we have the internet, we see one opinion after another opinion after another opinion after another opinion after another opinion. And then we get on social media and we see how other people are doing it and the things that they're saying they're doing, and pretty soon what starts to happen? Yeah. Love and Logic is based on just 2 simple rules. The first is this: adults take great care of themselves in loving ways by setting limits without anger, lecture, threats, or repeated warnings. So let me back up on that. Adults take great care of themselves in loving ways. That's the first part. And what's the primary way we do that? By setting limits. In loving ways. I remember one guy in my audience, he was great. He said, "Hey, agreed with everything. You had me right up to there." The loving ways part. He said, "I struggle," and I said, "We all do." It's interesting, though. Is it true that the more we get, the better we get at setting limits, the more loving we can become with everybody in our lives? So we take great care of ourselves by setting limits without anger, lecture, threats, and repeated warnings. Dinner will be on the table until 7:30. I don't want it. And when will it be available till? But I want something different. The whole time this dialogue's going on, right, you're thinking all the wonderful pieces of information you'd like to give the kid, right? The lectures, the warnings, the reminders, all those great things, but how do people really learn? They learn by watching us. They learn by making mistakes, experiencing the consequences. They learn by us being loving through the whole process, through empathy. Well, I'm not going to eat it. No worries. It'll be available till such and such time. And we hope and pray for a poor decision. And when it happens, we hope and pray for the wisdom not to say things like, well, if you would have ate what was served, you wouldn't have. We go inside of ourselves and we say, please give me the strength. Please give me the strength to keep my mouth shut and let that experience do the teaching. Because you know what? I want the experience to be the bad guy. I don't need to be the bad guy. Yes. Oh, yeah. Now you're talking about real stuff here. So let me repeat what she said. So let's say that the kid says, that's okay. I'll just make something for myself after dinner. And they go and make something for themselves. I have a really quick answer for you that wouldn't be very helpful if we don't really talk about this in terms of, okay, let's say this happens to us, not just this one, but the kid does something else unexpected, right? Because that's going to be the rule. Right? They're gonna find that one angle. If they're really bright kids, and they're going to turn out really great. I mean, those are the best kids. Those kids are always looking for the angle, always looking for the angle. They're going to find that angle. I'm going to give you a couple thoughts on this. One thought is, when you don't know what to do, or you're too angry to think straight, delay the consequence. We can start doing that when they're pretty young. So you find yourself in a situation where you're thinking, oh no, I have no idea what I'm going to respond, how I'm going to respond to what this kid just did. And let's come in close here with this. If I try to stop them now, it's going to get super ugly, and I might just say something or do something I'm going to feel horrible about later on. Are we talking real life here? So, is it okay to step back and say something like this? Oh, let's all practice together. The tone's important. Oh, let's do it. Oh, that's a great skill in and of itself. Oh, I'm not sure I'd do that. Something bad could happen. Let's all practice it together. Oh, I'm not sure that. I'm not sure I'd do that. Something bad could happen. I remember going to my mother. I was 16 years of age. Yes, I was that age at one time. My father told me I could have any car I wanted. Just let me know what it was and how I was going to pay for the whole cost myself, and I could have that car. A little road that goes back and forth from Evergreen to Conifer. Yeah, I grew up in Conifer. Population about 70 back then. We had party lines. You could listen to your neighbors' most intimate conversations with other people on the phone. That's a whole other story. And I'm on the school bus, and I spot this car, 1969 Chevy Camaro. Ooh. I mean, yeah. Now they're worth a fortune, but that's what every kid wanted back then. They wanted a Camaro and a mullet. You get a Camaro and a mullet, and you're good. And I had both. Don't ask me to prove it to you because you don't want to see the evidence. It's bad. But I bought that Camaro for $900, and it was worn out. As worn out as the day is long in the summertime. Bad tires, bad brakes, motor burning some oil. And being 16, I thought very carefully about what my next purchase with the money I'd saved would be, and I decided that the smart, mature thing would be to buy a new stereo. And I went to my mother and I proudly proclaimed my independence. I'm going down to town. I'm going to drive to Denver and I'm going to buy myself a stereo for the car. And she said, that's nice. And then she said, how are you going to pay for it? And I said, I have money, and I did. And she looked at me, that's even better. And then she said, oh, let's all practice. I'm not sure that I do that. Something. And then she did something really effective. And it was really a stretch for her. She clamped her teeth over her tongue. And you know what I did? I went and I bought a stereo. It was great. And the car broke down. I think it threw a rod. This is a serious thing. Absolute catastrophic engine damage. And guess who had to own that? And guess what she said about it? Okay. I got to see both of my parents grow up. And I got to see her by the time I was that age learn how to really handle people. You know what she did that upset me so much that she said very sincerely, with no sarcasm in her heart, she said, "That's got to be so disappointing. I love you." And she didn't say another word. I was upset because if she just would have been nasty about it, I would have been able to blame her. But she stole that from me by being nice. How could she do such a thing? She turned the tables on me, not as a manipulation, but as a genuine act of love, realizing that it was better for me to learn that lesson from the inside out than for her to try to impart it from the outside into me. And so that decision just bounced around in my own heart, and I had to live with it. I could never completely blame her for it. But, I started noticing something about myself. When I would hear her say, "Oh, I'm not sure I do that something," my ears started perking up a little bit. How do we teach our kids to really listen to us, our values? We build that relationship, but when we see things that are going wrong and they're about to do it and we can't stop it, we say things like, let's hear it. "Oh, I'm not sure I do that. Something bad could happen." And then we clamp our teeth over our tongue and we don't say a word and we hope that it goes poorly. And then when it does go poorly, we're empathetic instead of angry. We don't say a word because when we don't say a word, we send the message, "You can learn from this." When we say too many words, we send a different message. "You can't learn from this, and this is why I'm talking so much." "Well, I'll just make something after dinner, and I like Pop-Tarts, and we have Pop-Tarts in the house." I don't know if I'd do that. Something bad could happen. And then I keep my mouth shut, and I watch them eat Pop-Tarts, and I don't try to have too much eye contact with them for the rest of the day because I'm going to be too irritated and I might snap. Oh, man, I just let this kid do something dumb. What kind of parent am I? But now I have time, don't I? I have time to think, time to talk to friends, maybe crack open Love and Logic book a little bit. And in our house, things like that happened, okay? And I remember one time the kids were stealing food, and we believed in giving them just a little bit of allowance each week, practice money and that sort of thing. And it was a very small amount. And they got their little envelopes, and they opened them up, and "Mom!" That's what they say when there's a problem. "Mom!" She's not going to help you. I wanted to warn him, but I thought, no, I'll let her do this. Mom, where's our allowance? And she said, oh, let's all practice that one. Oh, that's for you, not the kid. Oh. Notice you've been taking food when it's not on the table and you haven't gotten permission. Huh? Now here's the good news in this family. The food that we offer at meals and that we offer, when somebody asks permission, we offer at no cost. The other stuff we charge for. We're not trying to make a profit. We're just trying to recoup costs on that. It's not a foolproof strategy, but here's the beauty. Buy yourself time. You hear what I'm saying? Buy yourself time. See, when you have time, you can come up with all sorts of creative things. And the basic mentality is, how can I allow this poor decision to feed back on the kid? Okay? Not in a punitive way, but just in a very natural way. Which brings us to the second rule of love and logic. Hand the problem back. Hand the problem back. First rule is we set limits in loving ways without anger, lecture, threats, or repeated warnings. Second rule of love and logic is when a kid causes a problem, we hand it back. We allow them to experience it. We don't add to it. We don't add on top of it to make it more painful. We just hand that problem back, and we're there to guide them and love them. So you have a handout. And by the way, before I go into the handout, which I've already been talking about the whole time, thoughts or questions? Oh, would you like the 2 rules of love and logic? Okay. So we're all going to help, okay? So first rule of love and logic. And by the way, I've had more parents say, I just remember those 2 rules, and I get really flexible, and I don't do everything the same way it's written in the book, which is great, I figured it out on my own way, but those 2 rules have been my guide, and it makes things work out for me. I've actually known schools where the teachers just used those 2 rules as they worked with kids, and they said it's so much simpler. So first rule of love and logic, let's all help. Adults set firm limits, okay? In what? In loving ways, without what? Anger, lecture, threats, or repeated warnings. Now, by the way, are you going to get angry from time to time and mess up with this? Yep. Is that okay? Yep. Is it maybe good for kids? Yep. Do kids need to know that when they do annoying things, sometimes it makes other people mad? Yep. Do sometimes kids need just a real good, stern talking to? Absolutely. This is not a cult. You know what I'm saying? You look at your kids, you figure out the situation, and sometimes you might just be real purposeful and correct in thinking that the kid needs to hear this. That is not okay. I don't like being around you when you act that way. And then it's done. Sometimes that has to happen. Why? Because that is what? Reality. It is truth. The second rule, let's go over that real quick. Let's all help. When a kid causes a problem, the adult hands it back. That's mostly what we've been talking about today. Really, I've just focused on a very small part of love and logic. So let's Let's hear any other questions before I move on. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, I will try. Okay. So you're mentioning, thank you for sharing that as well, that you have a son with ADHD and you believe in allowing him to fail as much as, to a point where he can still kind of get out of it with some guidance and help, which is perfect. But you felt like it still kept you ensnared in it. Yeah. And the truth of it is, I think that's sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, right? So being fair and realistic when kids have certain challenges that are just, they're neurological, they're part of them. We do what we can to help because they need the help, okay? But you're wise in your saying he still needs to fail a lot, just like other kids need to fail a lot. And again, failure is not a problem if you have enough support. See, people can have a lot of failure and challenges in life, but if they also have an extraordinary amount of support, they can get through it. So a thought on, and you know this, I know you know this, what I'm about to say, is when we have children with special needs, one of the things we want to do is we want to keep our expectations relatively high. We want to approach the kid with an attitude of you can, you can, you can. Because another little soundbite is this: kids will either live up to or down to the expectations we set. As a school psychologist, I saw child after child after child with significant special needs, but when they had the right level of support and teaching from the people around them, and the expectation was, you can do this, I'm going to show you it's okay to make mistakes, my love is always there for you, or I'm going to guide you along. When there was that attitude, I saw so many kids who a lot of people said, oh, he'll never, she'll never. They did. In fact, when I was working with parents of kids with special needs, there was a category. It was the he cans or the he can'ts. And it was maybe the best predictor of how the kid really did. But then it comes down to teaching. How do I teach this kid to give herself more reminders? How do I teach this kid with practical skills for coping with their challenges, their real challenges? Child with Down syndrome. I remember his name, little William. And his mom decided that she was going to teach him how to get ready for school every day. I think he was first or second grade, with a minimal amount of help. And so they practiced. And they had a lot of fun doing it. It was just kind of a game with her, and she did the best to stay positive. They practiced all the different things that you had to do in the morning to get ready. They'd practice that when they weren't in a hurry, on the weekend or whatever. They took little pictures of the things that William had to do in order to get ready, and she had played a little game with him. Which one goes first, and he put the pictures in order in his room, and they practiced and they practiced and they practiced. And guess what? By the time William was in third grade, he was higher functioning in the morning than the average gifted kid in America. Why? Because there was an expectation that you can do this. And then there was the support. There was a struggle. And then there was the support. Another question before let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
I have to read your book that bad grades, but for example, my teenager, initially during homework in semester one, he didn't focus. He had bad grades, and finally he was 17. Now he started doing the same mistake again, and I'm like, if I say like you again, you got B or F because you did not submit, he gets frustrated. Now the thing is, how, like, let him do the mistake, let him face again, or how to handle this with love and logic?
The kid gets a bad grade because he's procrastinating. Am I getting it right? Teenager.
And he already faced this in semester one. How
Yeah,
hard it was.
yeah,
Now he's doing same mistake in semester two.
yeah. So the first thing I ask myself with grades is, whose grades are they? Okay. Second thing I ask myself is, what's going to optimize any child's ability to do well in life? There are three things, and they might surprise you. First of all, I'm going to stay out of fights with him about his grades. See, the more power struggles there are between the adult and the child over learning, the less learning will happen. It's got to be the kids. As soon as there's a power struggle, it becomes mine, and they say to themselves, well, look at that. I don't have to do it. The way I win this whole thing in their mind is by showing that their lectures are not going to work on me. Right? Is control a pretty big emotional need for people? So, absence of power struggles. It's their learning. Number two, a heavy emphasis on serving other people. Serving in the family. Learning to contribute to the family in the form of chores. Helping people, their neighbor, just it may be formal types of serving or service, but it is helping other people in real ways without any expectation of reward. Massive correlation between that and overall mental strength, character, motivation. That doesn't mean that they are going to do well in school. It means they're likely, very likely to do well in life. Isn't that interesting, though? We often sacrifice the kids' service opportunities because we want them to stay home and do their homework. No, in our family, in the Love and Logic home, you get to do your homework after you have served the family and done other good things for other people because it's not about you. Oh, that's a harsh reality. It's not about you. Isn't that great? Because the more I realize it's not about me, the happier, more motivated I can be. The third thing is that we live by this rule with the kid. We build them up in their areas of strength so they're willing to take more risks in their areas of weakness. We find out what they do well. We put most of our energy into those gifts that they have. We don't try to steer them in the direction that we think they should go. We help them discover the way they should go, their gift, their skill set. Sound like a business leadership course right now? What are you good at, kid? Video games. Awesome. Well, a gift is something that you're naturally great at that also serves other people. That's what a gift is. It's not what you naturally are great at. It's what you're naturally great at, and it contributes to the welfare of other people. That's what a gift is. And so the response is, oh, let me know how I can help. It must be pretty disappointing to get grades like this. If you ever want some ideas about how to solve this problem, I'm more than happy to help you. And we gently guide, and we look for ways to help them learn to solve the problem. But most of our energy is put into those three things that I shared with you. The first step is empathy in the handout. The second step is asking that question, what do you think you're going to do? The third step is asking permission to share some ideas. Would you like to hear what other people decide to do? Then we share some ideas. Some people decide to do such and such. How will that work for you? And the last step is the hard one, and that is where we allow them to own the problem. We don't tell them which way they should solve it. We don't say, oh, that third one we talked about, that third idea I shared with you, that's the best one, use that one because then I'm owning it and the kid isn't. See, what's going to happen when we do this is kids are going to come up with ideas. You might share some ideas with them. They're going to pick some things, and when it goes well, who do I want to get credit for when it goes well? I want the kid to say, I picked that one. You know, I did that one. Is that motivational? Well, we're talking about motivation right now, knowing that we can solve problems. That's motivational, right? I have one other story for you. It's a quick one. It has to do with a text. A couple friends of Monica and I. They got a text from their son, freshman in college, Colorado School of Mines. Pretty simple curriculum to get through, right? Text goes like this: got my physics 1 midterm grade. ... 43%. Talked to the parents later on. We found out the class average was a 60%. That's a weed out class. It's known for that. But you know, you got to take that and you got to take physics too. I mean, engineering ain't going to happen if you don't have those two. All this kid's dreams. And you know, this is a kid who's a straight A student. Our university's filled with super bright kids, many of which have never had to struggle. And then it's like going from Pee Wee League to the NFL. And now they're struggling, and everybody else is. You know, these parents were in Texas. This is a long ways away from Colorado. I know them because there were some educators who hired me quite a bit to train at their school down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we became friends, and it just happened to be that their son got into mines about the same time that my youngest got into mines, and they were there together. And they'd used this model for years and years and years. And the kid said, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that you feel bad for me and you love me, and then you're going to ask me what I'm going to do about this. You know, but seriously, I mean, this is really, really hard, and we're feeling for you. And we're just, if you want any ideas, let us know. And kid says, no, I got it handled. And so he went and talked to some professors and peer tutors and things like that. Got all the help he could. And got another text, and they were expecting, they're, kind of anxious about what's going to happen, because it feels like, when your kids are older, wow, these are their hopes and their dreams, and, what happens if this doesn't work out and all that, and, well, got my final total grade, cumulative grade, physics 1, ... 68%. Well, prerequisite for physics 2 is what? Passing grade in physics 1. Oh. Now, this story, is this just about kids who go off to college? Let me ask you, is this just about kids who go off to college? No. See, 2 of my boys did not go to college. 1 of my boys is finishing up college. Well, but they've all had those trials. And most of the time it's been when we weren't there. Which is really hard, right? And he said, I know what you're going to tell me. You love me. I know that. And what am I going to do? And they said, well, I don't know. You can share it with us or you can keep it to yourself. But son, we know we've been through this drill. That was kind of like the discussion. We just love you and we know you're working hard. So if there's anything we can do to support you in this, we'll do it. And they talked on the phone, and he said, well, I looked at my options, and there's a Physics 1 course during the summer. And he took the Physics 1 course. And they got a lot of little text, with ... dots, and the number after the ... dots was not much higher than it was the first time around. But the number after the ... dots at the end of that semester was a good solid high C, which is excellent in that course. And, we talked and we spent a lot of time visiting and, just as friends with them. And they said that was the turning point where it came together for our son in his head about how to, I hate to say it, but how to work that system. You know what I'm saying? Because college is a system and everyone is a little bit different and there's ways to work that system. If you work hard enough, you can get the kind of support, you can get the kind of help, and you know which professors to take and which professors not to take, and you get through that. And they said, that's what made the difference. It wasn't us encouraging him, it was him, let's hear it, who encouraged him. He did. Because he'd been there before. See, he wasn't one of those kids that hadn't struggled before. Academics had been easy for him, but life was full of plenty of struggles because the parents allowed him to have those struggles. That time's coming, isn't it? Is it coming for you? When they're going to be maybe far away and they're going to be bigger and the consequences are going to feel a lot bigger. And so, when is it great for them to start experiencing more wind? I'll ask you that again. When is it great for them to start experiencing more wind? Yeah. And here's the beauty of it. things might go completely different than you planned. But you'll have created, guided, good, solid people who know how to love. Who knows how to love? Somebody who's weak and insecure? Or somebody who's truly strong? It's not about grades, not about college, not about success in life, it's about love. That's how we raise loving kids. Yes.
What if when you say, let us know how we can support you, and maybe in a very unrealistic way? For instance, middle school is struggling with a teacher, and they would say, get the teacher fired. How do you respond?
Okay, great question. What if they give you an unrealistic, if you would just get the teacher fired? I could do that. I could work on trying to get her fired. And how would that accomplish my goal of helping you grow up to be a really strong person who's capable of loving people? And the kid would say, I think it fits right in. The beauty of it is, it doesn't matter what he thinks right now. It matters what I do right now. But have I just planted a seed in his head? And now what do? From time to time, I might throw in something like, if you ever want some ideas about how to work and be successful with a really challenging teacher, let me know. And we allow that to work its way out. Isn't it interesting? I'll just add one more thing. When we get involved in these things and we feel like we have to solve them, does it make things better? The kid's relationship with the teacher better? No. It always creates chaos. But when we're empathetic, we maybe say one little thing that we truly believe in a loving way, and then we back off and let that be between those two people. What tends to happen? I had a teacher like that. West Jefferson Elementary School, I will not say her name. I believe in, the names have been withheld to protect the guilty. She was nasty. She wasn't just demanding, she was fairly nasty. And I remember going home and saying to my dad, well, you know what Mrs. Pop said to me today? A little bleep in there to cover it up. And we talked, and he said, aren't you fortunate? And I said, what do you mean, Dad? He said, aren't you fortunate to have somebody like her in your life right now? Well, what do you mean? Well, think about it. You're getting a head start on most people. Most people don't learn how to deal with a difficult boss until they have one. You're going to be so far ahead. But I know it's going to be hard. And if you ever need to talk, I'll listen. If you ever want ideas, I'll try to share them with you. And then he asked me this question. He says, who believes in you? And who thinks you're just the greatest? And I didn't answer it, but I knew that was him, that he thought I was the greatest and that he loved me and carried me through that year, got through that year. It was a rough one. But what's more important of a lesson to learn? The curriculum in 5th grade or the opportunity to learn how to deal with a challenging person. I can tell you what's helped me the most in life. I made up for the other stuff I didn't learn, you know. That was easy. Do you have a good time with me today? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Wow. Couldn't we just